So let's start with presenting ourselves. The title here is actually originating from Matthias. So we didn't make the title, but we like it a lot. So I'm Peter Jonsson, and some of you might be following me on Twitter at Blaufish, and we also have our Säkerhets podcasten, where we talk security in a very informal manner in Swedish, which you can get on iTunes and everything else. And I'm from Omega Point, this company, and together we got...
My name is Joachim Strömbergson. I run a company called secworks that works with security for embedded systems and we'll talk security for digital infrastructure in different times. I'm previously been working and writing quite a lot of called crypto blog and try to talk a lot about in industry like this. Yeah. Okay.
And you, is it public that you're about to move to a new company?
Yeah, I can tell after in January I'm going to start working at Comitech as a security consultant. Okay, and what we are, the key goal of it today is try to help you understand that SSL TLS can provide security, good security, but how do we get good security? If you don't use SSL TLS correctly, then you might end up with a nice gate like this that looks very intimidating but doesn't really provide that much of security. Like a boss.
Next slide.
Yeah. Okay, so and you saw the agenda a little bit before, and this is basically what we're going to talk about. And we're going to start talking about what HTTPS and SSL TLS, what it is, and then we're going to go down and look at attacks that we've seen through the years, and particularly related to the latest attacks, and attacks on related technology. That is not the SSL TLS protocol per se, but other support structures around it. I'm going to talk about Snowden and what we can sort of expect and what's being done to mitigate what we see problem with trust today. And then we're going to go in and look at how to code security for TLS, so you actually get that security that we want to have, and particularly how do we validate it. So we start out by what is HTTPS and SSL, and Peter starts here.
So, HTTPS is, unless you're actually coding SSL TLS, this is probably what most of you actually see. Some of you might interact with it on an API level, and some of you might just interact with it through the browser. So, HTTPS is really only normal HTTP being tunneled through SSL or TLS encryption. So it's not some fancy protocol. There's a little bit of special things about it, but really, if you go down to it, it's mostly just HTTPS being tunneled over SSL. So this protocol is trying to give us some classic security properties. Like, for example, it's trying to give us confidentiality. That means that it's trying to prevent eavesdropping. It's also trying to prevent someone from modifying the traffic. So if someone is messing with the traffic while in transit, that should be detected by the protocol. And also where most people experience problems with HTTPS is in the authentication stage, where you're getting client certificates or service certificates, and you need to evaluate those. And typically you don't see client authentication that often. There are a couple of uses which actually use it, but most sites on the internet are only authenticating the server. So the server has no way of knowing that the person talking to them is actually who he claims to be, unless you enable this option. And it's important to realize that we're only getting authentication, meaning that we know who connected. We don't actually know that this information hasn't been tampered with. It's not providing non-repudiation like when you have with message signing, because it's only the start of the communication which is authenticated. The rest of the communication will just be protected from modification by unknown parties, either recipient or the sender of SSL traffic can lie about what occurred during the communication. So this protocol is not good for any solution which need long-term proof that what was transmitted was actually what was transmitted. And one of the really important aspects of this protocol, which also makes it a complex protocol, is that it has a lot of agility, meaning that it can choose different levels of security and different algorithms, so to speak. I also should point out that you are free to interrupt us. We can answer most things, but if we're too hard or too basic or anything, just let us know. So this is an old protocol. It basically entered commercial networks 1996 with the SSL 3.0 version. There were versions before that, but they were completely broken. And this is the name almost everyone is using when they talk about the protocol, while it actually being standardized as TLS. So TLS is the real name, and SSL is what everyone is calling it. With the different revisions, they actually increased security. So it wasn't just standardized, they fixed some security issues in the protocol. And in the next version, they also fixed security flaws. And then they fixed security flaws again, as well as introduced a lot of new ciphers. So this is not a perfect protocol by any means, meaning that it's not people sat down and invented the perfect protocol. That's not what happened. We invented one protocol, and then we got more and more flaws were found in the protocol, and we patched, and with almost every patch we tried to keep compatibility. And one of the big problems with this protocol is that even if you make a big change in the protocol, it takes many years before it's actually commercially used. There's a very slow adoption rate because people don't want to upgrade because they're afraid some browser might not work with the new protocol. So they delay upgrades, and everyone is waiting for everyone, and basically it becomes very slow adoption rate, which has improved recently. And there are actually some fundamental flaws which are known in the protocol, and we are kind of living with because it's hard to fix the protocol. So, for example, there's a lot of cipher suits which are doing authentication in the wrong order. And today we know that there's a lot of security attacks which are possible because authentication is done in the wrong order. And that's something which the protocol is living with and trying to sort of mitigate in small fixes. And until people move on to the new cipher suits, we will actually be living with more or less severe versions of those flaws. So what I would like to say here is really that if someone took all the knowledge they had today and tried to build something perfect, they would get something more secure than what we actually have, because we're living with the problems we have invented in the past.
Okay. A question here: how many of you feel that they're sort of comfortable with terms like symmetric ciphers and asymmetric ciphers and hash functions? Well, so the question is, so we can probably skip that. Otherwise, we'll have sort of, because as Peter talked about, SSL, TLS, they use so-called cipher suites, which are combinations of different algorithms that provide security. Oh, you went to that one anyway. Okay.
Hey, it's a nice slide.
Oh, it's a nice slide. Yeah, what's an example? So, will you stop pressing?
Well, where do you want to be?
Well, I wanted to be there actually. So, I lost my track there. So, as Peter showed, we have slides on symmetric versus asymmetric ciphers and what they actually do with the different. You want to see that, or shall we? Because we have a lot of material, so we could probably, if everybody feels comfortable with this, we can actually skip it. Skip it. Yeah. Okay. I just want to. These one I want to show anyway. These because I like them so much. These are actually one of the first cipher machines. These are typical symmetric ciphers. This is actually President Jefferson that developed this machine. And you can see this wheels is very popular in the early crypto machines. And that's one from a lot of brass and stuff like this. And if you have early 1900s, you started getting these electromechanical machines. And these are typical symmetric cipher machines that all needs to have a key sent over to before we actually if you have an agent in the field, it has to have a key so you can encrypt the message, or you need to have a key so you can decrypt it. So then you end up with things like this, like code books. Very cool slides. But we skip that and asymmetric ciphers and hash functions and why they're used, and come into this. This is what Peter says. This cipher suites in OpenSSL, for example. This is actually on my machine, and that we can actually see what different ciphers enables for protocols and what we use for different algorithms. For example, we can see that we're using AES for encryption with 256 key, which is really weird. I think in OpenSSL that the first cipher which actually suggests are using the Korean seed cipher as a box cipher. This is really weird, and this is why this is important for you. I think is that in OpenSSL, and if you look in your browser, you might have these kind of guys. This is a called cipher suite with null ciphers. That means that if you have this in your browser, in your client, your client tells the server, I want to be able to use these kind of cipher suites, and the browser selects one of those. You will get your green lock, but all the information sent will be sent in clear text. So so when you develop stuff, these cipher modes are really good to be able to use and enable, because then you can look in a traffic and see that the stuff that is tunneled through the HTTPS tunnel looks okay and it works. You can debug, but don't never have those enabled in production. Okay. And one thing I would like to talk to you about though is as Peter mentioned, the SSL TLS handshake. It's really in the beginning of the session where all the magic happens. When the handshake is done, everything is just tunneled, and we're running symmetric ciphers to encrypt everything if we don't have null ciphers, and we have MAX that provides integrity protection in some way. But this is where the magic happens. And so if you take Wireshark, for example, and you look at the traffic, and you're going to see your client connected to the server, it sends client hello, and it's going to tell you, okay, I want to use SSL version v2, and then hopefully the server says, no, you're not, because that's not going to use, but SSL v3 or TLS 1.1 or something like that. And it also sends a list of these ciphers, like the one I showed you, to the server. And these are the ones I'm interested in using, that I'm supporting. And then the server takes that one and looks at his list, and it takes the first one that matches. So that's why the order is so important also. So the server responds with server hello, since SSL version is going to be using in this protocol, in this session, and the cipher selected, cipher suite, and it sends the certificate. And
question. Is it this, the order that the server sends the certificates? That's the order that defines which is to be chosen.
no, it's the order in the client list.
Ah, okay.
Well, it's actually, you get the list, and then the server looks in his list of preferred ciphers. You can also have a list of preferred ciphers, but it's basically order matching. So the first one that matches the same, that's the one that's going to be selected. So that's why you can in your browser, in your client, you can actually go in and you can take away a lot of things you don't like. But then you might end up trying to talk to aftonbladet.se, and then you end up with RC40 anyway.
So there's no ordering in the server list.
Well, it's the first match between the two lists. So the order is important for the server also.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, so the server sends back the versions going to be used, the cipher selected, and it sends back the certificate for the server public key that's used to identify the server. And then, of course, the client should verify and validate the client the server certificate, and if it fails, it should stop here, of course. And everybody assumes that's going to happen, and we're going to show that rarely happens. Actually, it's really scary. But anyway, if we find out that it validates, then the client generates what's called a master secret, global data, and then to use the public key from the certificate to encrypt the master secret and sends it back to the server. And then both the client and the server actually generates the keys used for encryption and for MAC operations. So anybody see any problem with this? There is actually one problem. And that's this. If you have somebody that for some reason has a huge bunch of hard disks and can record a lot of traffic, has access to a lot of traffic, whoever that might be, they can store a lot of sessions talking, secure sessions talking. And then somehow, if they can get hold of the private key of the server, they can actually decrypt all traffic, previous traffic. So that means that even if you had a good secure session with the server, and you used your services of that server, and then you terminated the connection, in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, somebody can actually decrypt your session and find out what you're doing. So this is a problem that we're talking about quite a lot now. And there is a solution to this that is being rolled out pretty much right now, which is called perfect forward security. Secrecy. Damn! Should do this. Perfect forward secrecy, or simply forward secrecy. And the important thing here is that there's actually no master secret communicated between the parties. Both parties agrees on the master secret by exchanging public messages with each other. And after the session is done, you throw away the secret that was generated. So it's nobody be able to. If you're just looking at the traffic, you cannot record the master secret because it's not there. It's created in the endpoints. If somebody can access the endpoint, can be in the server, in the client, that's another thing, because then you can capture it in the system. But just by looking at the traffic, forward secrecy actually protects the communication in future. So even if someone records the traffic. And this is done using something called Diffie-Hellman key exchange. Anyone who would see how it works in high level, or? Yeah. I'm not going to go through the math, but basically the main algorithm right here is we have Alice and Bob, of course, and they agree on two values, G and P, generator and polynomial, in it, and exchange these between each other. So if somebody sitting in between and looking at this, they can record that information. And then, and this is the important thing here, Alice and Bob generates random numbers. So they need to have a good quality random generator, generate big numbers. And then, which is their private secrets. And then they use the algorithm to generate a value, these two values here, and then they can send those values to each other. And the man in the middle can actually look at these values and see whether it's been exchanged. And when they receive the values, they can actually generate a third value here, which is the secret key, or the master secret, in the case of SSL TLS. And the important thing is that you cannot, just by observing these values here and these values here, you cannot recreate the values, the secrets here that we're using here, and thereby you cannot generate the master secret. So this is really, really smart. Thank you, Diffie-Hellman.
From which TLS version is this implemented?
It is implemented, I think, at 1.2, but more importantly, it's done in the cipher suites. There's a certain cipher suites that supports forward secrecy.
I think the protocol has support. There has been support for this a long time, but for various reasons it hasn't been used that much.
No.
The people are expecting a different kind of opponent today than they did a short while ago.
Yeah. The people didn't generally expect to have all the traffic of internet being recorded and stored somewhere for a long time.
And they were afraid of the overhead of the calculations.
Yeah, exactly. It's if you're going to run forward secrecy, yeah, exactly. Forward secrecy takes you will have more messages going back and forth during the setup phase. So it is setting up a secure connection with SSL TLS takes longer time with this, and it requires more computation. But we are seeing forward secrecy being rolled out. This was last week. Twitter announced that they are turning on forward secrecy in their servers for the main service and for the API and for the mobile. So if you have a client that can talk forward secrecy, you can enable this now.
Just a question about the Diffie-Hellman key exchange. There are some different versions. You have different groups and stuff. I've done some firewall configuration, but I don't really know what the difference is.
Well, the values exchanged as GNP here. The GS group. So you need to sort of and those you need to select those in a good way. This is examples values. So if you select them in small values, for example, then you can actually brute force it pretty easily. So or easier.
Are there different security in these different versions of the Diffie-Hellman key exchange?
Yeah, of the ones that have been used for secrecy, I have to come back to that one.
There
But
should be primes as well.
What?
There should be primes as well.
Relative primes.
Yeah. But it's like for RSA, for example, selecting an exponent of 3, for example, has been shown to be pretty bad. Small values. And talking about keys, I want to talk a little about keys because if we don't have good keys, then whatever protocol we're using, whatever algorithm we're using, is pretty meaningless. So I want to spend a little bit of time on talking about keys. And if we're looking at a modern random generator in an operating system, it looks a bit something like this. There are algorithms that you probably know about. They're called PRNGs, or pseudo-random number generators. Some of them are really bad, some of them are really good, but the common thing with them is that you have a seed value, a start value. They're basically a finite state machine in some way. You have a seed value, and then you iterate and you generate new values. And if you look at the values generated, they can seem to have really good randomness, really good quality. They make really good keys. But if somebody gets hold of the seed and can figure out the seed, then all security is gone. The good thing with those kind of random generators is that they can generate a lot of data, a lot of randomness. But if you want to have good, real values, we need to use what's called physical entropy. We need to start with something physical, really. So if you look at for example, in Linux, for example, it looks at the movement of the head in hard drives. It's pretty interesting. We start using SSDs instead. Where are the heads then? So that's a really big thing, because if the physical the assumptions about your source of randomness changes, then the quality of the randomness you generate will be different. You remove an assumption, you change the assumption about it. So that's also why you preferably have more than one source of entropy. You can have the hard drive, you can have a microphone, you can just record white noise and take the low bit from the data inside. Lava lamps has been used. This here is, if anybody is using pretty recent, like Ivy Bridge, Haswell, Intel processors, those contains a really nice random generator based around inverters in the chip that is clocked with the clock frequency. So if you have a process running at 2 gigahertz, you get 2 gigabits of random data from that source, if we can trust it. That's the thing. Anyway, so we collect data, we do some filtering on it often, do whitening on it, and now we put it into one of those PRMGs. Or actually, it's called cryptographically safe PRMGs, usually built around a hash function or a block cipher, something like that. And this one can generate a whole lot of data. And then periodically we take some more of this stuff here, and we reseed this one again, and we keep doing this. So that's how we get. So dev random, for example, in Linux, is what the internals of dev random looks like, basically. And as I said, the big problem with random generators, particularly this early part here, is that it's hard to get any transparency. It's hard to control this part to verify it actually works. So we need to we need to trust this somehow. And if we look at Snowden, for example, this is where a lot of discussions have been around: is can we actually trust this thing? Come back to that later. But we can look at randomness and try to figure out if it works or not. Well, can you see this? This looks much worse on this projector. Do you see the lines here? Hardly. Well, anyway, this is numbers stolen from random.org, which is a source of randomness on the internet, and this is round function in Microsoft Windows, and just generates. And it seems to be generating values that sort of end up providing this pattern. And pattern and randomness they don't like each other really. So it's one way of sort of visually testing your randomness. There are really good tools for testing randomness, but it takes quite a long time. But this is one way illustrating it at least. And as I said, okay, what is a random? If you just look at a number, is it random or not? You need to look at random numbers in a sequence, usually a lot of sequences. When I test random generators, I usually take like 100 megabytes or a gigabyte, and I start processing them, because then we can start looking at it. A good way to test easy, compress it. If you can compress a file, a random file with a random data, and you can compress it to 50%, it wasn't random. Okay, and we have seen quite some interesting bad random generators that have affected SSL TLS. One was in Debian Linux, where some people actually were trying to do a security audit. Some nice tools like Valgrind. I don't know if you know Valgrind. Some of you do. It's a really good static analysis of code analysis tool that looks for things like read before write and uninitialized values. In this case, there was a buffer used in the random generator that purifies another one, so purify and flag for that. Well, here we're actually reading from a buffer that we haven't even initialized yet. So they actually talked to the developers of OpenSSL and said, well, we have this, and our tool complains. Is it okay to remove it? And I said, yes. That was bad. It turns out that we got something like, went from getting really good randomness down to something like 17 bits in total in strength.
And also they removed 2 lines.
Yeah.
They had a warning on 1 line and they removed 2
Yeah.
lines.
Yeah, they removed this.
They look the same and they did completely different things.
Yeah. So they removed these 2 lines, and this one complained, and they said, well, we're actually using it in this one too. So remove both lines. Yeah. Yeah. Here's another one of my favorites. Since we're living in Gothenburg, we have an energy provider in Gothenburg who has been setting out, if you have a house or something like that, I have, there is now they're sitting a box with an antenna in the basement next to my heat supply. Värmeväxlare in Swedish. And it's a Zigbee network used to send over the information about how much heat I'm using and energy I'm using, so I can pay for them. It's using Zigbee, which is a short-range, embedded, cheap communication system with a stack. It's implemented on a radio type, so-called IEEE 82.15.4, and as a software stack on top of it. Texas Instruments is one of the major suppliers of those chips, and they provide a free stack, a software stack that you can run to implement the protocol, so you can actually send data back and forth. And one of the things in the C-stack is that there's a random generator that you can use to generate the session keys to protect the information is. And it's been deployed, it's been used in millions and millions and millions of devices, from toothbrushes to energy systems. And nobody looked at the random number generated from this generator until Travis Goodspeed did this a couple of years ago. And so he generated a bunch of data and started looking at it, and well, it seems to be repeating. So it was something like every 8,000 hex, 8,000 bytes, it repeats, and it's the same pattern over and over again. So it's no security at all. And nobody's tested this. And Texas has fixed this problem. But that's this is why I try to put so much emphasis on it. You need to check your random sources periodically, particularly if you ship products. It might work now, but what happens if there's a new revision of the chip, for example, or if you update your operating system, whatever, check your random generator if it still works. Also talking about key strength, because that also come up. We're talking now about 1024-bit RSA keys are being deprecated, and we try to move to 248. Are we on time? No. Half. So this is sort of a try compare symmetric keys with RSA keys and little curve keys. And what we can see is that RSA keys, the strength of them scales pretty slow compared to symmetric keys. If we look at 256-bit AES, for example, we have to have something like 15,000 bits RSA, which would be very, very, very slow to run. And if you look at 248, some people we are moving to, that would be something like 1 or 3 bits. And if we try to sort of put that in perspective of how good protection do we actually get from this, if you look at, if you take the worst possible attacker has as much resources as it possibly can have, and how much protection do we actually get, sort of, and what we can probably trust. And if we look at 128-bit for symmetric, that would be 30 years, something like that. RSA 248 would be something like here, something like 10 years protection maybe, and 1024 would be here. So clearly, if we the way we use these algorithms and keys, we normally use asymmetric keys, or say, for example, for long term. It's in the certificate. We create a certificate that has expiry date of 10 years, for example, and that's going to be used for that 10 years. But the symmetric keys are used for session, and then we throw them away. So the lifetime of a symmetric key is much, much shorter than an asymmetric key. So we actually want to have the other way around. We would like to have the asymmetric key strength be much, much harder than the symmetric key. But what we can see here is that RSA 248 is going to be much, much worse than 128, for example. And even 4096 is going to be, it's going to be like 140 bits. I don't know.
So what you're saying is basically the most important thing to change right now is longer certificate keys.
Yes. No. But that's going to cost you. I'm going to come back to that a bit, but it's not that easy.
Of course
really.
It is.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Last thing about keys, I think, is this. if you're developing products, particularly for consumers, that uses any type of security, and you're actually going to export them outside Sweden, you are going to be interested in knowing that there are export rules. And it's called a Wassenaar Agreement. Sweden has ratified it last time 2009. It's not going to be updated as it looks right now. So these are the rules. Anything 56 bits symmetric key, 512 bits RSA key is, if you're using that up to that limit, then you can export as much as you want, at least to in EU, USA, Japan, what have you. If you go beyond this, and we normally do, then if you're exporting to EU, for example, you should send a note to Inspektionen för strategiska produkter to tell them that you're going to export. And if you're going to send to China, and that's a growing market, so it's not that weird, then you actually need to have a permit. And North Korea are probably going to get no from them. But it's a difference if it's consumer and consumer targeted, or if it's a component equipment. Ericsson Telecom, for example, but they need to have, probably going to have license for this. So, but as I said about asymmetric versus symmetric, if you look at this, 56 turns from a 12. In the regulation, the maximum RSA key is much weaker than the symmetric key. Totally wrong. One thing more to know about SSL TLS, and that is when you validate the certificate, how does it actually work? You know that the certificate you get from the server points to a CA certificate, and then points to a CA certificate, and then probably it splits up and then ends up somewhere. But finally, sometimes you end up in a root, CA root somewhere, and it validates. But where does the app or OS find the root? Does it actually download it all the time? Or do we find it? And there's what's called trust stores in your computer, in your system, in your browser, for example. There's databases of CA certs or root certs that you can actually look up. And they're provided by Mozilla, Apple, Microsoft, Google, and Oracle Java. And the thing is that we've tried to look at this. I've been working with this, and you thought, okay, I can type in Google, where is the trust store, basically, and of course there's going to be a web page, and they're going to list all their trust stores and what's in there, and I can look at when they update and everything. No way. If you talk to Microsoft, and we talked to Microsoft, it took like 1 month, and then we got an Excel file. That's their roots. So we had to parse that one. That was interesting. So there are actually pretty bad transparency in terms of the root. This is basically what we validate our servers against, and we actually don't get any good information about when these are updated and why they're updated and what's been changed. We have a project on GitHub called Cut, where we try to periodically download or extract the trust stores and compare them, and so we can detect when there are changes. And if you look at this is Microsoft's trust store. A couple of nice ones. Certisign is a private CA in Brazil, and their main certificate have a key of 224 bits, an MD5, and it's going to expire 2018. That's pretty long. These ones are. This is the Great Firewall of China, basically. This is the China Internet government certificates, and why these are so interesting or scary, and there's a couple other really interesting nations that has their certificates in these ones also, is that if you try to connect to your server and they detect this and they can inject another certificate to you and put it to another server, and that server points to this root, then your browser is going to say, yeah, you're connected to the right server. And you're going to be man-in-middle or have a gateway between you or the browser, and they can actually look at your traffic. So that's why these guys are so scary. And then you have the VeriSign, which everybody trusts, and VeriSign has a very nice one here also, that 1024 bits is going to go at 228. That's really scary. So everybody's it's really bad sometimes. Okay, that was me for a while. Should you start doing some talks on attacks?
Yep.
Yep.
So I think basically the interest in SSL is really based on that there's been some problems in it the last few years, and then of course what has happened very recently has of course increased that interest, and often we find that this quote here, that cryptography is typically bypassed, it's not penetrated. So there's we typically think about cryptography from an ideal perspective, where we think someone actually has to solve the complex crypto problem. But in the attacks we see, they're usually not solving the cryptographic problems. They're finding ways to crack the crypto without solving the hard problems. So the enemy is cheating, and he's cheating because there's something wrong in the protocol. Oh, this slide broke. We have been copying back and forth between two different programs, so some slides are broken. So padding Oracle is an interesting one, because this is probably the first practical attacks on SSL in recent years. It was found in 2002, and very few people took notice of it. And the idea here with padding Oracle attacks is that when we're sending a message through a channel, the channel doesn't know when we have reached the end of a message. And in order to know when we are at the end of a message, we are implementing padding. So the padding is basically a way to tell the system this is where the message ends. This is the most common way of padding. It's known as PKCS5 padding. It's also known as PKCS7 padding, and a bunch of different variants, but most of them do this thing. So it's basically either the communication will end with a block full of 8s. That means that the last block was complete, and then the final block was just a big terminator. Or the shortest padding is 0-1, which is saying that only 1 byte in the final block is padding. All the rest is actually real data. And what we found out, or the scientists found out, was that this really introduced a really bad vulnerability into the system. So if we're looking here at the encryption, in the CBC mode we are trying to decrypt this value when we're sending a message, and here is actual crypto. This is where the good, strong, hard things are being done, and we get some calculations here, and we reuse information which was transmitted before, and then here in the end the receiver finds out if the message was okay or not. So the attacker decides that he's not going to touch this value. He's not going to change the message he wants to crack. He's keeping it static. And since he's not changing this message, sending multiple variants of what he has recorded, this thing here, this intermediate value, it will be static. It will never change. But he has the ability to change this part of the communication. So, since we can ignore all this, it's basically static. The attacker has reduced the crypto, the CBC crypto, which when I was in school, it was the best crypto modes ever. It was the perfect thing everyone believed. But we can actually, in the attack, remove the hard. We can remove the real crypto from the cracking problem, and we basically stuck here with an unknown value, which as an attacker we want to find this value. We got this here, which we can change, and we got the plain text here, and the padding oracle will actually tell us what this message is. So the idea when you're attacking when you're attacking the padding oracle is that you're analyzing the message as if you're attacking an XOR crypto message. You're reducing it to just a series of XOR operations, and you have a message in the communication which tells you if you got the correct padding. And there's only 8 possible values which are correct. So if we want to crack the simplest byte, where there's only one, we know that the final value is 0, 1. Everything else in the block we don't know anything about. We need about 128 messages, because we just change the last block, the last byte, until the system tells us that we have found the correct value. So after 128 attempts, we know 1 byte. And to find the next byte, we just double the number of attempts, and then we find the padding, which is 0202. And to crack the entire block, we need about 1000 messages. So finally, the attacker will have everything he knows to decrypt the message. And it's like magic, because we're never attacking the actual crypto problem. We have sidestepped the entire cryptographic. We're not cracking any crypto. We're just skipping past the crypto. And of course, things should not be this way. You should not be allowed to do these things. But we have a cryptographic protocol which is misdesigned. The protocol at the protocol level is broken, because we are allowed to mess with the encrypted messages without the client being able to find out. So this property here, which is present in a lot of cipher suits in SSL, that's not the way how you should do crypto. And in the latest protocol, they introduced fixed cipher suits, which are doing cryptography in the right way. So there are, for example, AES GCM suits which actually do crypto the correct way and verify the messages before they try to decrypt them. But almost all the CBC suits which are in common use are broken. They are fundamentally flawed. And how do we solve a problem which is deployed all over the internet? Well, we do some magic. We try to lie to the client what is happening in the decryption process, and we fiddle around and we try to make it seem like no, it wasn't a padding error, it was just an authentication error. So they're doing some clever things here. And this is what the specification for the smart thing said. This is leaves a small timing channel, but it's probably not exploitable. And this year, yeah, it is exploitable. So scientists, they worked at this problem and they found out that in some situations where you have very ideal network conditions and you can do a lot of measurements, you can actually find this timing channel and decrypt messages. So the problem they fixed in 2002, they fixed again this year. So they made even more complex coding to hide this problem. And we still have, it's still flawed. We haven't fixed the problem, we have just made it harder to see. So now it's a little harder to crack this problem. And I mean, this is basically how we handle almost all problems in the SSL TLS. We do magic things, which makes it hard to exploit the problems which are well known. And some years ago we saw the Beast attack. It's actually exploiting the same property as we saw in the padding oracle problem, except we're not attacking the padding. What the authors of the Beast attack realized was that there was actually a paper published before them which basically said that you can do this, and then they just implemented the attack. What they realized is that if you have a server which is doing HTTPS, if you can get a client into here, an evil client, like for example an applet or a JavaScript, you can try to resend something which you want to become similar to this traffic. And then you can study the traffic, and you can do XOR operations, you can do calculations, and you can use this evil SSL connection to figure out what the good SSL connection is saying. And since all they need to do is inject the JavaScript, you can do this. For example, if we're connecting to bank.com on their HTTPS connection, if we also connect in on the HTTP connection, the network attacker can just inject a malicious JavaScript.
A question on that.
Yep.
Wouldn't the other process, I mean, the other application also need to run in the same process?
Yeah. So the Beast, it's named browser assisted exploit against SSL TLS.
So
Because
this shouldn't be an issue because Chrome has separate processes for all the browser windows, right?
That depends on if the SSL is in a different process as well. I'm not sure, but I think the majority of browsers were exploitable to this when the attack was published. And you could the two vectors which were used was applets and JavaScripts. And for JavaScripts, the needed WebSockets, and the WebSockets stack was actually reworked to make this attack harder to exploit. And there's also been discussion that this might be exploitable against more type of networks than situations than just the browser. For example, if you can get an evil client onto a network which is using a VPN connection, one single evil client communicating with the evil controller could perhaps mount a similar attack against VPN connection, but it's only for browsers where the attack has been demonstrated practically. And I really like these guys because they're the best at inventing names for their attacks. So this team, they have, for example, Beast, excellent acronym. They're superb researchers in finding funny acronyms, and their paper on this attack was named "Here Comes the XOR Ninjas." So these guys they're really funny at creating names. And crime and breach.
Excuse me. In this Beast attack, what exactly what was found out? What could the adversary find out here there?
Yeah.
I mean, the session key changes for each session. So what? So okay, he finds out something, but what can he do with it?
Yeah, the thing is here that this is the client being attacked, and this is an active attack occurring against the same browser at almost the same time. So when this attack was published, there was very little which were mitigating this sort of threats. So basically it will be the same key. And very little...
But it's two different sessions, right?
Well, it started from a client, from within the same browser, and it's connecting to the same server, and it becomes the same key.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
the session key is reused, right?
Yeah. I'm not really sure about the logic here, but in SSL you can either have that you're connecting on the very same TLS, very same TCP connection. So in that way, in that example, then it would be actually the same HTTP TCP connection, but more likely this will be a new TCP connection, and there's a field in SSL where they're saying that, hey, I'm on a session you have already authenticated, and sorry,
Session resumption.
Yeah. So then
Session resumption is you want to run actually. So
yeah. So let's say that you're doing 10 connections here. You only do the complex handshake once, and it's a much shorter handshake in the subsequent connections where you're saying I'm the same guy who use the settings. So this problem was they did some tweaks in the web servers here, and also a lot of browsers did tweaks to make this attack very hard to exploit in the future. And most web browsers mitigated this problem very fast, but Apple was really bad at fixing this problem, and I think they fixed it just this year or something. So Safari was not so keen on improving. But ask the clever questions. I love it, because otherwise it will just be stale here.
Should we take a break now, or shall we? How long is break?
Yeah, we can take a break because we've been here at an hour.
Yeah. How long more do you need for the attack section?
Now I can spend 10 minutes to more
that's
on
great.
it.
10 or 20 minutes before break. That's good.
Alright, okay, so So, feel no hurry here. The crime attack. It's yet another clever acronym. compression ratio something.
Made easy something.
Yeah, made easy. Yeah. Yeah, the expert at the inventing. So what they realized was that if you're sending a message and the message is completely different, there's nothing being reused, you get very bad compression. But if you're sending a message and it's actually very similar to something else in the traffic, you get good compression. Which means that if you can observe the good traffic, which is where someone is doing intentional communication, and you have some big secret here like the session identifier, and you want to attack from a network, if you can get the client to follow links, you can tweak the link, and for every time you send it a link, you can observe if this package, if the total size is decreasing, because every time you're getting better compression, it means that your guess of what the secret message is good. So you tweak your message, you tweak your attack time and time again until you can observe that you're getting a really short package. So the compression in SSL TLS, it's actually helping cracking the message being transmitted there. Yeah, and here we have a complete name. And you don't need to do anything fancy to exploit this attack. If you're on the network and you just can make any website send evil links, you can fool someone to participate into the crime attack. So how many of you have ever used compression in SSL? It's one of those. Yeah, you have. All right. So the Crypto Geek has done it. This is one of the things where you implement nice features into protocol because someone might find them useful. So this was really the crime attack exploited a protocol feature which was fairly useless and not very much used.
Yes, for embedded SSL, compression has been quite widely used.
Right.
In embedded space, they really like their size to be small. So anything they can sort of compress it down easily.
Yeah.
They like to turn on.
So the fix here, if we disregard that example where it actually was used, most systems actually fixed it by let's not do compression if we know compression is bad. And then someone published the next attack where hey, we got compression in the HTTP protocol as well. So the attack looks almost the same because it's virtually the same thing. We just moved the protocol from the attack from the SSL layer to the HTTP layer. And I think the most recent talk about practical vulnerabilities has been the RC4 algorithm. You might recall RC4 as being known as the insecure thing which broke wireless encryption. And people thought about the problem and decided that this is not a problem for SSL TLS. And a lot of people used RC4 on the internet. And then people this year, scientists, published that there are even more problems in RC4 that we didn't know about. And so they have published attacks which they're not really practical, because the requirements to exploit the attack is a little bit extreme. So it's not an attack which at the level it is today will be widely exploited, but the security margin for RC4 is so tiny now. It's very, very small luck that they haven't completely broken it. So, yep.
I was just going to ask, when you say it's not viable today, is it for the average Joe, or is it period?
It requires a lot of messages. So it will take a lot of time and be very active. And they're basically saying that if you put two computers next to each other in a computer scientist's lab, you can exploit this vulnerability. If you put two computers on the internet, then it's not viable because it will be too slow. And any improvements in the attacks against RC4, then it will be broken for the internet as well. So it's just luck which the RC4 hangs on right now. And it's the security margin is horrible. They're saying, so people are saying that don't do a quick fix issue for this problem, because this is not a quick fix problem. You need to kill RC4.
One thing about that is that the reason why so many are using RC4, as RC4 is a stream cipher, Semitic stream cipher, is because of the what you talked about in the beginning, the CBC attacks on which uses AES. In most cipher modes use AES or triple S, so the block cipher in CBC mode. So a way to get away from those exploits, people start using RC4 again.
Yeah.
Google, for example, enabled RC4 as one of their preferred cipher suites. So then we end up with this one instead.
Yeah, so this is basically what we're saying, that SSL is it's the thing which gives us security, but it's really at a pretty horrible state, because we are telling people to move away from an algorithm which is completely broken, which they moved to because the other thing was just quick fixes making it secure. And now we're telling them, move back to the quick fixes, because the quick fixes are much better than what you moved to. So, yeah.
And getting new ciphers or cipher suites into SSL TLS takes years.
Yeah.
It's a very long process.
I mean, there are fixes. There are great cipher suites. Everyone just has to enable them everywhere, and then the problem will be gone. And then we find out that making things happen on the internet has historically been horribly slow. I think right now is probably the best time ever to make changes, like we have seen with the perfect forwarding security, where people we talked about it. It's horribly hard to say for perfect forwarding secrecy. I always say it wrong, and after I told him, he's also saying it wrong. Yeah. But when you move to perfect forwarding secrecy, that's only happening because people are expecting the really bad guys, and the really bad guys being the United States government. That's the only reason why people are actually adopting new protocol and new cipher suits. Because there's been so many attacks on the SSL protocols, and none of those has historically made people move to the really the nice fixes. And people have always prioritized compatibility and having the same settings as they had before. And we're living in the historical times where people actually are deploying fixes, big fixes to their SSL stacks.
Yeah. Follow-up question, if I can. Regarding the perfect for secrecy, I've read that it's not an actual fix for the problem if the algorithm itself underlying it is flawed. Which seems to be the case here. So in our system, that's what I understand it.
That's one of the things that is being discussed. I'm coming back to you, Joachim. It's one of the things that can we actually trust the development mechanism we're actually using to do this?
Yeah, because I have a question. Okay, so you can implement perfect forward secrecy by using development, but you do not really know with whom.
There's 4 variants of Diffie-Hellman exchange.
Okay.
If we make it simple, we can claim that there's 2 variants of Diffie-Hellman exchange, and one of them is authenticated, one of them is unauthenticated.
You need some more authentication.
Yeah, in the authenticated version, you are the exchange has to be signed by the certificates which are providing the authentication. So it's probably not a good idea to use the unauthenticated Diffie-Hellman versions.
So for the client can know that it talks or can have reasonable good trust that it talks to the server, but the server cannot know really that it actually is doing the Diffie-Hellman exchange with the right client. That is true.
So there's a lot of cipher suits.
Yep.
Some includes RC4. Don't use them. Others are vulnerable to crime, breach, and then some.
Don't use them.
Don't use them.
No,
what's left then?
Not much.
But there's a lot of workarounds on the legacy.
Okay.
So the problem is less.
So they are vulnerable to crime based, etc., but it's really hard to do the attacks.
Crime is basically fixed by disabling compression support.
Okay.
Breach, not known what people will do about that. Beast is worked around in the implementations. They're doing different things to make the attack really hard. And what you could do is to move to the new cipher suits and disable support for the old cipher suits. Because if you move to, for example, GCM cipher suits, you are moving away from a lot of these issues. But then you're also saying that if someone wants to connect with some strange, really crappy device, they won't be able to connect. But remove all the old shitty, known broken cipher suits, then you will actually be pretty good off.
So GCM is a good mode to try to use, enable, because that one does authentication after encryption, so actually get it in the right order.
Is this a good time to take a 10-minute
Yes.
break? Cool. 10 minutes on the minute.